She is a narrated fiction story created for discussion and entertainment purposes.
Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They built a neighborhood. I bought freedom. Then they came for it, with fake fines, hidden cameras, and a war of paper and paranoia. What started as a quiet mountain retreat became ground zero in a battle against a rogue HOA drunk on power. I didn't start this fight, but I finished it. I bought that cabin with my own hands. Not literally. I didn't build it myself, but I paid for every single board, pipe, and nail that held it together. After nearly a decade of grinding it out as a systems engineer, saving every spare dollar, I finally managed to get a slice of peace in the Colorado mountains. It wasn't much, a modest A-frame nestled in pine trees, a gravel driveway, and a fire pit I put together with my brother over a weekend of too much whiskey and not enough sunscreen. But it was mine, entirely mine, paid in full, titled clean, and very intentionally not part of any homeowners association. I'd found the place 5 years ago through a guy I used to work with. He'd tipped me off about a semi-abandoned lot with no HOA entanglements, and the moment I saw it, I knew it was exactly what I wanted. Isolation, elevation, and no Karens within shouting distance. I used it for what it was, a getaway. I wasn't living there full-time. I had a condo in Denver where I worked remotely, but every few weeks I'd drive up, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, sometimes with family. Birthdays, New Year's Eve, July 4th cookouts. It was a place for celebration, for detachment, for being unreachable on purpose. The funny thing about mountains, they change slowly, but the people around them can sprout like weeds. About 2 years after I bought the place, a developer got a hold of a huge chunk of land about a mile down the road and slapped together a new community called Aspen Ridge. The name sounded like it had been designed by an AI trained on real estate ads. Polished cabins, paved streets, fiber optic lines, uniform mailboxes, and of course a freshly minted HOA to keep everything harmonious. I didn't pay much attention. Their plots didn't touch mine, and no one had any reason to wander uphill toward my place. But you know how it is. Where there's a homeowners association, there's someone who thinks they're God. The first sign of trouble was when I drove up one Friday and found a printed note taped to my front gate. Please contact Aspen Ridge HOA regarding community standards. That's it. No name, no contact number, just a logo and the phrase community standards like they were the sheriff now. I tossed it in the fire pit. Thought it was a mistake. Maybe they got the wrong address, or maybe one of their members thought they owned more land than they did. A week later, it escalated. I was up there again with two buddies, barbecuing, half drunk, watching the stars. No music, no yelling, no fireworks, just burgers and bourbon. The next morning, while I was collecting beer bottles, an SUV pulled up and parked right in front of my gate. Out stepped a woman in athletic wear, designer sunglasses, and a clipboard. Her entire vibe screamed HOA president with too much time and not enough opposition. "You the owner here?" she asked, not even bothering with a greeting. "I am. Can I help you?" "I'm Catherine Barlow," she said, flipping her badge at me like I was supposed to salute. "President of the Aspen Ridge Homeowners Association. We've been getting reports about this property." I blinked. "This property isn't in Aspen Ridge." She tilted her head like a confused dog. "Well, it borders the southeast edge of our community. Several residents have expressed concern. Unmaintained appearance, occasional noise, parties. It's my land, my house. I don't live here full-time. It's a vacation property." She smiled like I was a toddler holding a crayon the wrong way. "Well, you still fall within our shared-use visual corridor." I genuinely laughed. "Is that a real phrase?" "We like to keep the area looking cohesive." "I'm not part of your HOA." "That's something we're looking into." She left after that, but not before taking pictures with her phone of my gravel, my porch, my garbage bins. She didn't even ask. 2 weeks later, back in Denver, I got a certified letter. Inside was a notice of violation and an invoice for $672. Apparently, my unregistered usage of shared district infrastructure and environmental presence, whatever the hell that meant, was subject to a $14 per hour fee, retroactively applied for the 2 full days I'd spent on the property. I read it twice, then again. It looked official. HOA letterhead, invoice numbers, even a discount offer. Pay within 14 days and receive 50% off your fee. Like it was a damn parking ticket in downtown Denver. I almost laughed. Almost. Then I realized that if this letter had gone to someone less stubborn than me, someone elderly, or someone who didn't understand property law, they might have just paid it. That pissed me off more than anything. I called the number on the letter straight to voicemail. I emailed the address. Automated reply. I drove back up to the cabin the next weekend, and sure enough, a laminated sign had been zip-tied to a nearby pine tree. Aspen Ridge Zone, guest presence by HOA authorization only. It even had my lot number handwritten beneath it. That's when I knew they were serious. Delusional, but serious. So I got serious too. Hired a real estate attorney out of Glenwood Springs named Leslie Cohen. Tough as hell, sharp as a scalpel, and not a fan of HOAs. She reviewed my deed, pulled the county maps, highlighted boundary lines, and said the magic words. They have no jurisdiction. Let's sue them. I grinned. Let's. Leslie didn't waste time. The Monday after we met, she filed a motion in the Pitkin County Municipal Court challenging the validity of the so-called violation and demanding that the Aspen Ridge HOA retract the fine, remove all posted signage from my land, and cease further contact. In her filing, she included my deed, satellite maps, and county zoning documents, everything short of a finger painting labeled My Property in big red letters. We weren't just pushing back, we were punching holes in their entire premise. The legal language of the complaint was elegant, but the core message was simple. They were full of it. The court issued a summons for a preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. I figured it'd be quick. The judge would look at the paperwork, chuckle, and slap the HOA with a warning. But when we walked into that courtroom on a gray Thursday morning, it became clear that Aspen Ridge wasn't backing down. They brought a lawyer, and not some local guy who moonlights between traffic tickets and DUIs. No, they had some slick suit from Boulder with gelled hair and a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my chainsaw. He introduced himself as counsel representing the collective community interest of Aspen Ridge. Already a red flag. He talked in long, winding sentences that sounded like TED Talks run through a wood chipper. He claimed that their recent acquisition of adjacent properties had created an expanded stewardship buffer zone, which, under Colorado's cooperative development statutes, justified limited impact-based fee structures for proximate external users. I wanted to throw something at him. Leslie just smirked. The judge, a weathered man named Harold Canby, who looked like he'd rather be fly fishing, held up a hand mid-rant. Mr. Abrams, he said dryly, the parcel in question is not listed under your HOA's recorded articles of incorporation, nor is it annexed under any expansion clause. Unless you can produce documentation to the contrary, I see no basis for fee enforcement. The Boulder lawyer tried to pivot. Your Honor, we're not asserting ownership, merely operational proximity. The HOA maintains certain shared visual and infrastructural assets. Are you charging this man to look at trees? The judge asked flatly. Dead silence. Leslie leaned over and whispered, "This guy's already done." Judge Canby ruled then and there. The fine was voided. The HOA was ordered to cease all correspondence. And, my personal favorite part, Aspen Ridge was fined for misuse of mail-based enforcement. Apparently, there's a state law that prohibits non-governmental entities from issuing what appeared to be official citations without specific legal authority. Leslie had slipped that little landmine into her argument, and it went off beautifully. The HOA was slapped with a civil penalty of $3,000 payable to the state. I was awarded just over $2,000 in legal fees and compensation for undue administrative burden, which sounded boring but felt fantastic. I walked out of that courthouse feeling like a man who just stepped over a landmine and watched it explode behind him. Leslie clapped me on the back. This should shut them up. I nodded, already picturing a quiet summer with cold beers and 0 unsolicited citations. We were wrong, of course. Wildly wrong. At first, things did seem resolved. The signs came down, no more letters, no more drive-bys. I went up the next month with my sister and her 2 kids for a weekend and didn't see a single HOA goon. I actually started to relax again. We hiked, grilled burgers, watched the stars. Then, 2 weeks later, I got another letter. This one wasn't from the HOA directly. It was from a company called Community Infrastructure Solutions, LLC. Sounded like a firm that installs bike racks for city parks. The letter was written in the same smug legalese. Your parcel has been identified as falling within a Peripheral Community Access Corridor, PCAC, and as such may be subject to future usage assessments. Assessments? PCAC? These psychos invented a whole new term just to keep harassing me. Leslie looked over the letter and scowled. They're trying to play the shell game, outsource enforcement to a consultant group so they can deny direct responsibility. Classic HOA trick. I've seen it in Orange County. First time I'm seeing it in the mountains, though. We did some digging. Community Infrastructure Solutions turned out to be a two-person LLC with a mailing address, and I swear I'm not making this up, that matched the HOA president's home address. Catherine Goddamn Barlow. She'd literally created a fake company to keep pressing her fantasy of jurisdiction. It was almost funny. Almost. We filed a cease and desist within 24 hours, attaching the court ruling from Judge Canby and explicitly naming Barlow as acting in bad faith. I added a personal note at the end. Cease pretending to be the IRS. Leslie grinned when she sent it. Let's see what she does next. What she did next was call the county assessor's office and file a report claiming that my home was an unoccupied structure being used for commercial purposes, aka a rental, and requested a tax reevaluation, because why not weaponize the tax code while we're at it? I got a notice of inspection in the mail, flagged possible reassessment. The thing was full of buzzwords: seasonal occupancy, short-term rental footprint, transient guest patterns. I called the inspector's office, gave them my side, and they agreed to hold off until after an in-person review. It was clear this woman wasn't just mad about trees and noise. She wanted control. She wanted to own the entire goddamn mountain, and I was the nail sticking out of her perfect HOA spreadsheet. I wasn't going anywhere. Let her bring it. I came back up to the cabin one weekend in late May, expecting the usual silence, maybe the smell of wet pine and a raccoon in the garbage. Instead, I got surveillance. I was halfway up my gravel driveway when I spotted something new. A slim gray camera bolted to a lodgepole pine near the base of the property line, aimed squarely at my front door. It had a little white placard under it that read, "Monitored by Aspen Ridge Community Safety Network." I slowed to a crawl, stared at the damn thing, then rolled down my window and let out a bitter laugh. They were watching me now. I parked, walked up, and followed the cable down the tree. It led to a tiny solar panel mounted above, all of it zip-tied with the kind of precision that screamed HOA approved. The camera wasn't on their property, it was bolted into my tree, on my land. The rage didn't hit all at once. It just simmered, steady and low, like a campfire on wet logs. I took a photo, then carefully unscrewed the device and left it on the road, resting politely on the HOA's side of the boundary with a post-it note, "Yours." Keep it that way. But of course, this wasn't just about a camera. That was just the first breadcrumb. Inside the mailbox, I found something worse. A glossy brochure, professionally printed, with the Aspen Ridge logo embossed in gold foil. The headline made my blood pressure spike. Notice: Zone Realignment and Shared Access Governance Plan, now in effect. Inside there was a map. My land now outlined in dotted yellow lines labeled Shared Usage Buffer Region. They'd redrawn their own imaginary borders. And, apparently, I was inside them. The document claimed that due to increased regional impact and proximity integration, any properties within this buffer were now subject to community use monitoring, with fees assessed based on daily presence hours, infrastructure wear, and noise impact. They even had a chart, a full chart, Sevo, with my parcel number and estimated presence time for the past 3 months. They'd been tracking me. The next envelope held an invoice, $980. Usage fees, they called it, broken down into hourly charges, infrastructure strain, light pollution offset, and, my favorite, environmental echo impact. Whatever that was. I almost drove straight down to their office. If you could call a trailer with a flagpole and a fake stone facade an office. But Leslie advised restraint. "This is textbook strategic harassment," she said, flipping through the papers. "They want to provoke you. Get you to do something rash so they can claim you're unstable or combative. Don't give them the satisfaction." I took her advice, but only just. That night, I sat on the porch with a bottle of rye and a notebook, writing down every single interaction I'd had with these lunatics. Dates, names, photos. If they wanted to escalate, I'd be ready. The next morning, a friend of mine, Daniel, showed up with his camper to spend the weekend. He's ex-Army, now working IT security for a major firm, the kind of guy who thinks NSA-level intrusion is a good conversation starter. I told him about the camera, the invoice, the imaginary echo fees, and he just laughed and said, "Want me to run a sweep?" He pulled out a handheld RF detector from his truck, the kind they use to scan for unauthorized signals, and, sure enough, we picked up two separate frequencies near the edge of the cabin. One was low band, probably motion sensors. The other had intermittent spikes, likely a wireless feed. We followed the signal to a second device, hidden beneath a decorative birdhouse mounted on a stump outside the tree line. HOA colors, HOA branding, on land that was still, according to the county assessor, 100% mine. We documented everything: photos, GPS coordinates, a video of Daniel narrating the discovery like he was on Dateline. Then we called the sheriff. To my surprise, the deputy who showed up was calm, respectful, and familiar with Aspen Ridge. I didn't even have to explain much before he sighed and said, "Barlow again." He took our statement, confirmed the property lines on his in-car tablet, and agreed that yes, the devices constituted unauthorized surveillance. He removed them himself and said he'd be filing a formal warning with the HOA and forwarding the matter to the district attorney's office for review under Colorado's privacy laws. That should have been enough, but it wasn't. Because that afternoon, as Daniel and I were grilling burgers, two men in matching blue polos and khakis walked up the driveway. HOA compliance officers, according to the little patches on their sleeves. One of them had a tablet, the other had a measuring wheel. Afternoon, one of them said, cheerful like a mall Santa, "We're just here to document occupancy periods and periphery encroachment zones. Should only take a few minutes." I stared at him for a beat, then I said, "You've got 30 seconds to get off my land before I call the sheriff back and press trespassing charges." They didn't move, so I took out my phone, started recording, and walked toward them. The one with the tablet said, "Sir, we're authorized under Section 14C of the Aspen Ridge Shared Use Initiative." I cut him off. "You are not authorized to be here. You are trespassing. This is private property, not subject to your imaginary bylaws, and I've already reported your organization to the sheriff, the county, and my attorney." They didn't look particularly rattled. The guy with the measuring wheel muttered something about non-compliance surcharge. Then they turned and left, but not before snapping a photo of my license plate. Daniel muttered, "This isn't just some overreach. This is coordinated." And I agreed. But the worst part came that night. Around 11, we heard something outside. I flipped on the porch light and saw movement near the fire pit. Two people, both in hoodies, running off into the trees. They'd left behind a small laminated sign stuck into the ground like a grave marker. "Unregistered occupancy, fee pending review." That was it. No name, no HOA logo, just those words. Daniel picked it up, held it in the porch light, then looked at me. This is psychological warfare, and I realized he was right. This wasn't about grass or gravel or garbage cans anymore. This was about making me feel like a trespasser in my own home. They wanted me to leave. Instead, I reached for my phone and hit record. The following weekend, I came up to the cabin alone. I needed the solitude. After what had happened with the surveillance, the fake invoices, and the goons with measuring wheels, I figured it was time to reassess my entire situation. Maybe upgrade the fencing, maybe install some cameras of my own. Instead, I found a goddamn parking citation on my own truck. I'm not joking. It was tucked under my windshield wiper, like we were downtown LA on a Tuesday. Bright yellow, laminated, printed in bold block letters. Unauthorized vehicle, zone parking violation, $140 fine, pay online within 10 days. It even had a QR code. I laughed out loud, partly from disbelief, partly because it was just so absurd. I scanned the code, mostly for morbid curiosity. It led to a payment portal labeled Aspen Ridge Transportation and Flow Control Division. Not a real agency, just another HOA costume. Later that day, Leslie confirmed it. They'd registered it as a DBA, a doing business as, through the state, under the HOA's umbrella. Legally meaningless outside of their actual jurisdiction. But here's the kicker. They'd also begun issuing similar citations to my guests. Two of my friends who visited in April had just gotten letters from a parking enforcement agent warning them of unlawful vehicle residency. Vehicle residency. That's how far they were reaching now. And then came the noise complaint, a letter again. This time from Community Quality Council, another fake entity with HOA fingerprints all over it. It claimed that my property had exceeded acceptable ambient sound levels during the previous month and included an itemized breakdown of environmental disruption penalties totaling $350. I hadn't even been there more than 2 days that month. This wasn't just harassment. This was a sustained, calculated attempt to manufacture a paper trail against me, to make me look like a repeat offender, to give them some fabricated justification to escalate further. And it was working. At least on paper, they were building a file on me, one complaint at a time. So I started building one too. I photographed everything, every envelope, every sign, every fine. I kept audio logs on my phone. I emailed timestamps and summaries to Leslie every evening like a paranoid project manager. I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was shaping up into a pattern, a system, an abuse model hiding behind community standards and bureaucracy. One night, while sorting through my mailbox, I found something different. A postcard, no envelope. It read, "We noticed you're frequently unresponsive to our courtesy notices. Repeated non-compliance may result in a temporary access suspension to your residence pending review by the HOA board." I stood there on the porch, holding that little piece of laminated psychological warfare, and read it 3 times. Suspension of access to my own home. That was the moment something in me snapped. I called Leslie and told her I wanted to go nuclear. She was ahead of me. "Good," she said, "because I just got something from a friend in the Attorney General's office. They're opening an inquiry." Apparently, I wasn't the only one Aspen Ridge had been bullying. Another resident, or ex-resident rather, had filed a formal complaint a month earlier about forged violations, fraudulent charges, and aggressive debt collection tactics. Sounded familiar. Even better, someone had started a local blog under the name The Ridge Report, chronicling HOA abuses with anonymous tips, leaked emails, and blurry photos of board members yelling at homeowners. I scrolled for an hour. I wasn't alone. I was just the first one loud enough to make noise outside their fences. The same night, I caught them red-handed. It was nearly midnight when the motion light outside the cabin blinked on. I looked out the window and saw 2 men in dark jackets walking around the side of my house. One of them held something, a clipboard or maybe a scanner. The other had what looked like a roll of reflective tape. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I walked outside slowly, flashlight in one hand, camera in the other. "Evening, fellas, can I help you?" They froze like raccoons. "We're with Ridge Community Infrastructure," one of them stammered. "Just doing perimeter mapping." "On private property?" I asked. They exchanged a look. "I don't think so. Not unless you've got a warrant or a bottle of scotch with my name on it." They turned to leave. I followed, recording their faces, their car, a white Ford Escape with a magnet sticker. HOA Patrol, Ridge Zone 2. I called the sheriff again. This time, they didn't just log a report. They filed a formal trespass notice against the HOA, naming the board directly. I sent the video to Leslie. She said it was gold. Then came the retaliation. The next day, I got an envelope. No return address, hand-delivered. Inside was a notice of emergency administrative lien intent. The HOA was claiming I owed over $1,000 in cumulative fees and had 10 business days to settle or face a temporary lien action for protective compensation. Leslie nearly choked when she read it. "They're threatening to lien your property without owning any legal interest in it. That's not just overreach, that's outright fraud." And it was. Under Colorado law, only entities with actual lien authority, mortgage lenders, tax authorities, or legally bound associations can file liens. Aspen Ridge had no such authority over me, but it wasn't about the legality. It was about fear, about exhaustion. They wanted to wear me down, to make me wonder if maybe it was just easier to sell and disappear. But I wasn't wired that way. Instead, I installed my own surveillance, 6 motion-activated trail cams, and a live feed system that backed up to the cloud. I put up new signs. "Private property, legal action for trespass will be pursued." And for good measure, I sent a certified letter to Aspen Ridge. No lawyer, no legalese, just me. It read, "Try me again, and I'll own your homes." By the time June rolled in, it felt like I was living in a low-budget legal thriller with an unlimited budget for bullshit. Every week brought something new from Aspen Ridge. Fraudulent invoices, fake departments, late-night surveillance, and now the looming threat of a lien built on vapor. I wasn't intimidated anymore. I was pissed. Leslie, bless her vengeful little heart, took the gloves off. We filed a civil lawsuit against the HOA and its board members personally. No more dancing around the edges. We were going after them for intentional infliction of emotional distress, trespassing, and unlawful surveillance, fraudulent attempt to impose a lien without jurisdiction, defamation through false documentation, and enforcement notices. And that was just round one. Leslie also filed a motion with the District Court of Pitkin County requesting injunctive relief to stop all further contact, fines, enforcement actions, and presence on my property by any HOA-affiliated individuals or entities. The moment we served them the papers, and I do mean served, as in a sweaty guy named Kent walked up to the HOA trailer and said, "You've been served." Something shifted. For the first time, they stopped pretending to be benevolent stewards of Mountain Harmony. They lawyered up. But it wasn't a clean response. No press statements, no public denial. Instead, they panicked. 2 days later, I got a phone call. Not from Leslie, not from the sheriff, but from a deputy attorney in the Colorado Attorney General's office. A woman named Sophia McAdams. She said, "We've received multiple complaints about the Aspen Ridge HOA over the last 6 months. Your case might be the one that opens the gate." Apparently, I wasn't the first. A retired couple across the ridge had been fined for putting up a hummingbird feeder without pre-authorization. Another man was charged $480 for non-conforming roofing shingle tone on a cabin built in 1972, before the HOA even existed. And then there was the Airbnb scam. Turns out, Catherine Barlow, the crown queen of HOA tyranny, had been using short-term renters as fake voting proxies in HOA decision-making meetings. These weren't homeowners, these were tourists, people staying for 2 nights who got handed a clipboard and a cookie and were told they were helping shape the community. Aspen Ridge had used those votes to approve the buffer zone expansion, the one that now supposedly included my land. That was the linchpin. Once we got our hands on the internal documents, leaked by a whistleblower who used to be the HOA's secretary, it was over. The vote logs were a mess of forged initials, mismatched dates, and absentee ballots submitted by people who'd never even seen snow before. Leslie sent the documents to both the Attorney General's office and the County Zoning Board. The fallout was immediate. The state opened a formal civil enforcement case against Aspen Ridge HOA for fraudulent governance practices. The board was subpoenaed, their bank accounts frozen pending audit. Catherine Barlow, somehow still clutching onto her delusion of authority, tried to claim that the vote reflected the spirit of the community. The community responded by booing her off the stage at the next town hall. I wasn't there in person. I watched the live stream, but I heard the moment it happened. Someone in the back yelled, "We're not your subjects, Karen," and the crowd roared. Then, like a failing star collapsing under its own ego, Aspen Ridge started to implode. 3 board members resigned within a week. The fake business names they'd used to issue fines were deregistered by the state. The county issued a cease and desist order for all HOA enforcement activity until further review. And I was just getting started. With Leslie's help, I filed an amended complaint seeking punitive damages. We now had hard evidence that Aspen Ridge had illegally attempted to expand its boundaries, used falsified votes from non-owners, stalked and harassed residents with surveillance, attempted to lien private properties they had no legal claim to in a courtroom. That's the holy grail. That's not just negligence. That's organized abuse. It was around this time that I was contacted by a reporter from the Denver Post. She wanted to run a piece titled HOA or Private Regime, The Rise of Weaponized Governance. I gave her everything. Photos, documents, the surveillance video, even the fake parking citation. A week later, the article dropped. The response was explosive. Residents from across Colorado started sharing their own horror stories. Entire Facebook groups popped up. One HOA president from Lakewood tried to defend Aspen Ridge in a comment thread and got ratioed into oblivion. And suddenly, I wasn't just fighting the HOA, I was leading a movement. Leslie warned me not to get distracted. "We're still in litigation," she said. "Don't start making speeches until we've got a verdict." But something had shifted in me. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was defending the right to own any property without being terrorized by control freaks in pastel vests and badge clips. Still, we kept our focus. The court date was set. The subpoenas were flying, and buried in all the legal debris was a sweet little footnote from the county recorder's office. Aspen Ridge's expansion plan was officially declared null and void. Their buffer zone, gone. The shared usage corridor, fiction. The fees, illegal. I printed that letter and framed it. Then I mailed a copy to the HOA's old P.O. box with a note that simply read, "You lose." They say justice moves slow, but when it finally hits, it hits like a truck loaded with bricks and the smug expressions of every HOA board member you ever wanted to punch. The court date came in mid-July. It was hot. I wore a suit I hadn't used since a cousin's wedding, and Leslie was in full courtroom predator mode. Dark blazer, no jewelry, hair up like she was ready to take a head off in front of a jury. Aspen Ridge showed up too, or what was left of it. Catherine Barlow walked in with a face like she'd been chewing lemons for a week. She was flanked by a new attorney, younger, clearly uncomfortable, and whispering way too often. I guess the Boulder guy bailed once the case stopped being cute. The courtroom wasn't packed, but a few reporters sat in the back, and a handful of locals, the same folks who'd been harassed, ticketed, or fined for everything from gutter color to excessive patio ambiance. They nodded at me when I walked in. The judge, same guy, Harold Canby, took the bench and wasted zero time. This was the continuation of a civil case with enough evidence to choke a horse. The discovery file alone was thick enough to kill a rat if you dropped it. Leslie presented the case like she was serving a 5-course meal. Meticulous, devastating, and impossible to interrupt. She outlined everything. The forged vote logs from Airbnb renters, the made-up business entities used to issue fines, the surveillance cameras installed on private land, the citations, the phony lien threats, the physical trespassing, the fabricated buffer zone map, and, cherry on top, the leaked email from Catherine instructing someone to apply pressure until he sells or folds. Catherine's lawyer objected, citing context, but Canby waved him off like a mosquito. Save it for cross, if you've got any. When it was their turn, the defense tried to spin everything as an attempt to maintain community quality standards amid ambiguous boundary interpretations. That phrase actually made me laugh. The judge didn't. "Miss Barlow," he said slowly, peering over his glasses, "you attempted to exert legal authority over a property you did not own through fraudulent means, using fabricated evidence, and you did so persistently after being ordered to stop by this court." Silence. I could hear her jaw clench. He turned back to us. "This court finds for the plaintiff." Boom. I was awarded $11,000 in damages, a mix of punitive fees, reimbursement for legal costs, and emotional distress. The HOA was ordered to publicly retract all issued fines, liens, and warnings, remove all mentions of my parcel from any HOA maps, plans, or documents, issue a written apology for harassment and misrepresentation, permanently cease any enforcement action against me or my guests. And just when I thought it couldn't get better, Judge Canby added one more thing. The HOA was fined $35,000 by the county for repeated violations of municipal zoning laws, unauthorized surveillance, and harassment through fraudulent correspondence. The fine didn't go to me, it went to the state, but I didn't care. It was enough to sink them. That night, I sat back on the porch of my cabin, a cold beer in hand, and watched the sun dip behind the pines. No cameras, no patrol cars, no laminated notices taped to trees. Just quiet. Just mine. Within a week, Catherine Barlow resigned from the board. 2 other members followed. The HOA entered what they politely called administrative restructuring. Translation, the whole thing was burning down and nobody had a hose big enough. And then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Not a citation, not a threat, but an actual normal letter from the new interim president of Aspen Ridge, a guy named Marcus Hall, early 40s, apparently a tech consultant who'd only recently moved in. He apologized, genuinely, said he had no idea what kind of lunacy was going on and wanted to rebuild the HOA from the ground up based on transparency, voluntary participation, and community trust. I appreciated the effort, really, but I also didn't believe in fairy tales. Still, I agreed to meet him. On neutral ground, the coffee shop in town, he seemed earnest, frustrated, even embarrassed. He told me half the homeowners were furious once they saw the receipts. Some had been fined hundreds of dollars without even realizing the fines weren't legal. Others had paid under threat of liens and were now demanding refunds. Marcus wanted to make things right. I told him I didn't give a damn what they did, as long as they left me the hell out of it. He agreed. Then came the media wave. After the Denver Post article hit, the story spread. It got picked up by a regional NPR affiliate. A segment ran on a consumer rights podcast. People across the country started writing in with their own HOA horror stories. I started getting emails, calls, invitations to speak. One of them was from a state legislator, a representative from Boulder who'd read the story and wanted to introduce a bill that would tighten restrictions on HOA expansion, voting rights, and transparency. "Would you be willing to testify?" she asked. I thought about it for a while, and then I said yes, because this fight was never just about me. Testifying at the state legislature wasn't something I ever pictured myself doing. I'm not a podium guy. I don't say community with a straight face. I say things like, "Who the hell bolted a camera to my pine tree?" Or, "If one more laminated notice shows up on my property, I'm bringing a blowtorch." But there I was, 3 weeks after the verdict, standing in front of the Colorado House Local Government Committee, wearing the same suit I'd worn to court, hands slightly sweaty, reading from a statement I'd written the night before in a mountain of takeout boxes and coffee cups. I kept it short, direct. I told them about the fake fines, the invented departments, the late-night trespassing, the surveillance, the attempt to lien my property without a single legal leg to stand on. I told them how fast it all spiraled, how little oversight existed to stop it. I told them this: if you don't own an HOA property, you think it's not your problem until they build one next to you, until they invent a fake border and decide you're inside it. The room was quiet when I finished. A few members nodded. One woman looked stunned. Another just muttered, "Jesus." Then came the ripple effect. The story caught fire again. More media, more pressure. The legislator who'd invited me, Representative Keller, formally introduced the bill. It was called HB 1448, the Private Governance Reform Act. It proposed mandatory public disclosure of HOA boundaries and voting procedures, prohibition of enforcement actions against non-members, heavy penalties for fraudulent enforcement or false documentation, state-level registration for HOA expansion attempts with direct neighbor notification. I read the full draft and nearly wept. It wasn't perfect, but it was a damn good start. Meanwhile, back in Aspen Ridge, things kept shifting. The community wasn't just rebuilding. It was transforming. With Catherine Barlow out of the picture, Marcus and a few other residents called for a full audit. What they found was worse than expected. HOA funds had been misallocated. Thousands had gone to consultants with no credentials, legal review services that didn't exist, and, most ridiculously, landscaping expenses for property the HOA didn't own, including mine. Turns out they'd been hiring a landscaping crew once a month to visually standardize the view from the main road. That meant trimming my trees, raking my gravel path, and planting decorative shrubs without my knowledge, all while billing their own members for it. Marcus called me, voice shaking. We're issuing refunds, a lot of them, and we're turning over financial records to the DA. It felt good, but not clean. Not yet. That's when the real twist hit. I was sitting in a diner, half listening to a podcast on HOA horror stories, one that had recently mentioned my case, when a familiar voice came on during the listener Q&A. Catherine Barlow. She was calling in, live. And instead of doubling down, instead of spinning more crap about community stewardship, she apologized publicly. She sounded tired, broken even, said she'd let power go to her head, that she thought she was doing good, protecting property values until it became about control. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. I sat there, coffee going cold, listening to her say the words. I hurt people. I lost my home over it, and I think I needed to. That should have been satisfying, but it wasn't, because deep down I wasn't out for blood. I just wanted my peace back. Later that week, Marcus invited me to speak at a Ridge community forum. I nearly declined, but Daniel, ex-Army buddy turned HOA surveillance hunter, talked me into it, so I went. They held it outside, on the lawn between cabins. About 30 residents showed up, folding chairs and all. No microphones, no cameras, no laminated crap, just people. I talked about freedom, about the cost of defending it, not just from governments or corporations, but from your own neighbors when they forget where their property ends and yours begins. And then, after I finished, something weird happened. People clapped. One woman, someone I'd never seen before, raised her hand and said, "Would you ever consider joining the board?" I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my water. "Absolutely not," I said, "but I'll build you a damn good firewall if they ever come knocking again." Afterward, a few people came up to shake my hand. One guy offered me fresh eggs. Another said he used to think HOA rules kept things civilized, but now he wasn't so sure. And an older couple just said, "Thank you for not backing down." As I drove home that night, real home, cabin home, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. Stillness. Not silence, not absence, just that right kind of stillness, when you know no one's watching you, finding you, mapping your pine trees, or deciding how many porch lights is too many. Just me, my land, my rules. And one hell of a story to tell if they ever tried again. A few months passed. The mountain turned gold with the fall, and the cabin finally felt like what it was always meant to be. Untouched, undisturbed, mine. No cameras, no signs, no fake invoices. Just me, a stack of firewood, and silence so pure it rang in my ears. The lawsuit was behind me. The fines were paid. Catherine had disappeared from public life entirely, and Aspen Ridge, once a smug little kingdom of overreach, was now a humbled neighborhood with actual rules and real transparency. Ironically, their HOA was functioning better after getting its teeth knocked out. One afternoon, I got a certified letter. No threats this time, no scams. It was from the Colorado Office of Consumer Protection, the legislation I testified for. It passed. HOAs across the state were now required to register enforcement boundaries, notify adjacent property owners of expansions, and disclose all enforcement records. The first and last line of the letter stuck with me. "Thanks to your case, we've changed the law." I stared at those words for a long time. Later that night, I walked the perimeter of my land. No reason, just habit. The trees whispered in the wind, the moon hung low, and I stopped at the spot where their camera once watched me. Now it was just pine and quiet. I smiled, turned back toward the porch light, and said out loud, "You lost." But this time, I wasn't talking to them. I was talking to the fear they tried to plant in me, the exhaustion, the slow erosion of peace. They lost, and I won.